Grace sat alone on the bench outside the diner, her breath carrying the weight of sadness and disappointment. The soft hues of the setting sun filtered through the towering buildings, casting a pale orange glow over her. In her hands, she clutched her neatly folded apron, symbolic of a chapter in her life that had just come to an end. The distant sound of honking cars mixed with the slow but purposeful echo of approaching footsteps. A sleek black car pulled up in front of the diner. Grace looked up, her expression marked by curiosity and apprehension, as a man in a sharp suit stepped out. The car door shut with a decisive click. The tall figure, exuding authority and composure, walked toward her. "Excuse me, are you Grace?" The man's voice was warm yet commanding, making Grace flinch slightly. She looked up, her wide eyes a mixture of surprise and uncertainty. Standing before her was none other than Mayor Preston. His gaze held a seriousness softened by an undeniable warmth. "You don't realize it yet," he began, pausing to let his words sink in, "but your actions have changed the way we see kindness in this city." He smiled faintly. Before continuing, "And I'm here to offer you something that could change your life." The moment froze as Grace stared down at the business card he handed her, her eyes reflecting both confusion and a glimmer of hope. If you've ever doubted that small actions can spark significant change, this story will make you think again. But the bigger question remains: what brought the mayor to Grace, and what will she do next? Grace's story is a testament to the transformative power of compassion. Hit follow to ensure you don't miss more heartwarming stories like this one. Now, let's rewind and uncover what led to this moment. The diner buzzed with its familiar morning energy, a symphony of clinking plates, hushed conversations, and the occasional call of an order from the kitchen. The scent of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, wrapping the small space in a comforting warmth. Grace moved swiftly through the crowd, balancing trays with practiced ease and jotting down orders without hesitation. Despite her pace, her attention to each customer never faltered. Her smile was like a balm, calming and soothing, making everyone feel at home. Whether it was the grumpy old man who ordered black coffee every morning or the young couple stopping in for breakfast before work, Grace had a way of making them feel seen and cared for. Grace had worked at the diner for months now, but today, the heaviness in her chest felt unbearable. The hurried steps of customers no longer gave her a sense of vitality. The laughter and chatter, though loud, echoed like distant noise from a world she no longer felt part of. The greetings she exchanged, the carefully plated dishes she delivered, that all of it had lost its meaning. She felt trapped in an empty space where people came and went, leaving no trace behind. In the narrow kitchen, steam rose from the frying pans, forming a thick, cloudy haze that blurred her vision. Her hands moved mechanically, chopping vegetables and arranging plates without a thought, immersed only in the greasy smell and the din surrounding her. She realized she had repeated these actions countless times, yet nothing ever seemed to change. The exhaustion she felt wasn't just physical, it seeped into her soul. Grace wondered if she would ever escape this suffocating feeling. The customers in the diner barely noticed her beyond their orders. They asked for food, sat at their tables, and ate in quiet indifference, as though nothing else mattered. Grace sighed, her hands pausing briefly as she glanced out the window. A sudden gust of wind swept through, carrying fallen leaves with it, adding a chill to the already cold atmosphere. In that moment, she felt like one of those leaves, unseen, unnoticed, drifting without purpose. Just then, as she turned back toward the counter to prepare another plate, her eyes caught sight of a man sitting outside the diner. His coat was worn, his hair unkempt and greasy, and his eyes, they carried stories untold. His frail body hunched against the cold, but his gaze wasn't just that of someone needing a meal. It was the look of someone exhausted by life, someone who had spent far too long in the shadows without a way out. Grace stared at him, then glanced around the diner. The eyes of the patrons remained indifferent, cold, as if the man outside didn't exist. But something inside Grace tightened, as though a hand had reached into her chest and gripped her heart. A strange feeling coursed through her, one she had never experienced before. It wasn't fear or unease. It was a powerful pull from deep within her, a call she couldn't ignore. She knew that if she stood there, if she let the world pass by as if nothing had happened, nothing would change. And so, her heart made the decision to change, even though she didn't know what would come next. Grace walked toward the door, determined to bring the man a meal, not just food, but a little hope, a little compassion in this chaotic world. Grace stopped abruptly, her heart tugged by the scene before her. Homelessness wasn't uncommon in the city, but there was something about this man, something in his eyes that made her unable to look away. She felt a strong urge, as if some force was telling her she had to do something. She glanced quickly around the restaurant to make sure the other tables were being attended to, and then, without a word, she walked toward him. Grace slowly made her way to the door, holding a plate of hot food. The steam rising from the plate was like a soft comfort against the biting cold. The icy wind crept through the gap in the door as it opened, causing her to shiver, but her gaze never left the man huddled on the sidewalk. Outside, the sky was overcast, mirroring the feelings of the people in this crowded but cold city. The man looked up as she approached. His tired eyes widened in surprise, mixed with a hint of wariness. His worn-out coat clung tightly to his thin frame, and his cracked hands tried to stuff themselves into his pockets, seeking any warmth. He stammered, his voice hoarse. What are you doing?" Grace sat down, offering him the plate with a soft smile. "Just a meal. I thought you might need it more than anyone else." "In here." The man looked at the food, then at her, his eyes brimming with tears. He didn't say anything for a few moments, hesitating as if afraid that if he reached out, the food would vanish, like all the dreams that had been extinguished in his life. Finally, his trembling hands slowly stretched out, almost timidly, as if he couldn't believe he was worthy of such kindness. Thank you," his voice cracked, barely above a whisper. He reached for the plate, but his hand shook, his fingers stiff as though they no longer had feeling, lightly brushing the tray. I don't have any money," he mumbled, his voice heavy and thick, as though the words themselves were hard to say. His skin was wrinkled, his eyes looking downward, red from shame. "You don't need money," Grace replied, offering a warm smile. "This is my gift to you." The man stared at her, his face a picture of confusion, surprise overtaking his gaze. "Why are you doing this?" he asked softly, as if unable to believe what he had just heard. "Because you deserve kindness," Grace said simply, her eyes firm but filled with warmth. "Everyone does." The man hesitated, looking down at the plate of food in his hands, his lips moving slightly, but no words came out. His gaze grew distant, as if unable to believe that kindness had found its way to him at this moment. "I can't find a job. I can't sleep because of the nightmares. My family tried to help, but I pushed them away. And now I'm here." His voice was barely a whisper, each word like a confession, heavy and filled with regret. His hands clenched around the plate, his rough fingers as though trying to hold onto the fragile hope left within him. Grace nodded, her heart tightening at his words. She couldn't help but feel a sharp pain in her chest, each beat feeling like it was breaking under the weight of unspeakable sorrow. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that, Ben. But you're still a human being, and you're not alone," she said softly, trying to convey strength in each word. Grace watched him eat, each small bite seemingly savored with rare appreciation. In the restaurant, curious eyes began to turn toward the window. A few customers whispered, murmurs filled with discomfort. "What's she doing? Helping a homeless person right outside the restaurant? That's strange." Grace knew she was being watched, but she didn't care. The ground beneath her feet felt more solid as she watched the man slowly regain some strength. Just a few minutes later, the restaurant door swung open. The sharp voice of the restaurant owner, Mr. Bennett, cut through the air. "Grace, what do you think you're doing?" Grace stood up, turning to face him. Her breath quickened, but her gaze didn't falter. "I'm just helping someone who needs help." Bennett glared at her, his face flushed with anger. "You've embarrassed this restaurant in front of the customers. You're fired." The air seemed to freeze. The whispers in the restaurant came to a sudden halt. Grace felt her heart tighten, but she refused to back down. Her voice rang out, firm and clear, like a beacon in the storm. "If showing kindness is something to be ashamed of, Then maybe I shouldn't work here. She took off her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held her head high. She turned and walked out without looking back, not even for a second. The cold wind hit her face, but inside, a strange warmth began to fill her. The homeless man watched her as she walked away, his gaze filled with gratitude. For him, the plate of food wasn't just a meal. It was a resurrection of belief in humanity, a thing he had thought the world had lost long ago. Grace sat on the bench outside the restaurant, her mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. The anger she felt toward Mr. Bennett, the sadness of leaving a job she had been attached to for so long, and the doubt about her decision all tangled in her mind, making it hard to think clearly. She sat there, eyes staring blankly ahead, unaware of the sleek black car stopping nearby. Only when the door opened did she notice a tall man, dressed in a sharp suit, with an air of authority surrounding him as he walked toward her. It was the mayor. He approached her, his voice warm and polite. "Excuse me, are you Grace?" Grace looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She was a little confused, but still answered, "Yes, I'm Grace," her voice soft, her lips trembling slightly. "I heard about what just happened," the mayor said, sitting next to her. "And I want you to know that your actions were truly heroic." Grace's eyes widened, her heart seemed to stop for a moment. "Heroic?" she whispered, surprised. "But I lost my job." The mayor nodded, his expression unchanged. "Yes, sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price. But people like you, those who live with heart, are exactly what this community needs." He took out a card from his pocket and handed it to her. "There's a non-profit organization that works with veterans and the homeless. They're looking for compassionate and dedicated people." Grace took the card, a spark igniting inside her. The heavy feeling in her chest began to be replaced with a glimmer of hope, even though her hands still trembled uncontrollably. "If you're interested, I'd be happy to recommend you," the mayor said, his eyes locked on Grace with sincerity. Grace felt a surge of emotion fill her chest. She raised a hand to wipe her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands shaking as she took the card. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked. "This means so much to me." The mayor didn't stop there. He shared Grace's story on social media, praising her bravery and encouraging the community to do more to help those in need. As soon as the post went live, it spread quickly, garnering thousands of views. People were moved by Grace's compassion, and together they spread her message. Grace felt a warm wave rising within her, but she couldn't deny that her heart was still pounding, her fingers still trembling whenever she thought back to what had happened. She never expected such a small action could ripple out so widely, making her feel both relieved and empowered. Grace's story quickly spread, sparking a wave of kindness throughout the community. Donations poured into local shelters, and eager volunteers stepped up, ready to help the homeless. Businesses began partnering with charities to create job opportunities for people like Ben. A few days after Grace left the diner, her story had transcended the small neighborhood and was spreading across the entire community. A customer who had been in the diner that day posted the story online, detailing how Grace helped the homeless man and bravely stood up against injustice. The post included a picture of Grace leaving the diner, her head held high, captured through the glass window. The post quickly gained traction, receiving thousands of shares and comments. People from all over expressed their admiration for Grace. One person commented, "Her kindness reminds me that we all have a responsibility to those who are less fortunate." The story was not just beautiful, it had sparked action. Shops and businesses in the area began to make changes. A small restaurant nearby organized a Meal for All day, inviting the homeless to enjoy free meals every weekend. A bakery also announced they would donate leftover pastries daily to local charities. Non-profit organizations in the city also took notice of the story. A volunteer group reached out to the homeless man Grace had helped, providing him with temporary housing, medical care, and job opportunities. After years of wandering, he finally felt the warmth of a home and the compassion of others. The story even inspired young people. Students from a nearby school organized a winter coat drive for the homeless. A boy shared in his class speech, "If someone like Grace can change a life with just one meal, then we can do something too." In addition to its impact on the community, Grace's act of kindness marked a turning point in her own life. A few weeks after the incident, Grace received a call from a major nonprofit organization in the city. The representative said they had read her story and wanted to offer her the position of program manager for their homeless assistance initiative. Grace, who had been uncertain about her future after being laid off, was stunned by the offer. She felt deep within her that everything had happened for a reason. She accepted the job with determination and enthusiasm, knowing this was the path she was meant to follow, a path where she could make a real difference. With her new role, Grace continued her journey by hosting community outreach events. During one such talk at a local school, she shared the story of that day with a warm smile. "Sometimes, our small actions can create a wave far greater than we ever imagined. I didn't think one meal could change so much." Grace's story became a living example of kindness, reminding everyone that you don't need power or wealth, just a caring heart, and anyone can make a miracle happen. Ben, once living in the shadows of hardship and despair, was now witnessing a remarkable transformation in his life. He was receiving help from charitable organizations, getting medical treatment, and finding stable housing. Ben could hardly believe the change. His eyes now sparkled with new hope as he realized that life still offered opportunities for people like him. Not long after, he found a part-time job at a community center where he could help other veterans struggling with life. His hands trembled gently as he helped others, as though giving back what he had once lost, but his eyes shone brightly, full of determination. Years later, when reflecting on that fateful day, Grace couldn't help but smile. It all started with one simple act, one act of kindness, but it had grown into a movement, one that had changed many lives and reminded us of the power of compassion. For Ben, the meal Grace gave him was not just a plate of food, it was a lifeline. It was like a life raft, pulling him from the abyss he had once thought he could never escape. Holding that plate of food, his body shook, and his eyes glistened with a hope he hadn't known in years. For Grace, that encounter set her on a path she had never imagined. She felt a new, stronger sense of purpose fill her heart. What she had done wasn't just about helping one person, it had sparked a wave of kindness, spreading love far and wide. She felt an invisible energy surrounding her, fueling her to keep moving forward on the challenging road ahead. Dear friends, if this story has touched your heart, please like and share it to spread this message of love to others. Grace's story proves that even the smallest acts of kindness can bring about extraordinary change. If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Have you ever taken a small action that made a big difference? Share your story in the comments. Your voice could inspire and rekindle hope in many others. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to share it with your friends and family to spread the message of kindness and empathy. Be sure to follow the channel so you don't miss the next inspiring story. Click here to watch more meaningful videos. Who knows, you might just find the motivation to change your own life. Thank you for being with us. Let's spread love together to make the world a better place, one day at a time. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding.